Well, welcome back to Dired In episode 2.
The second one.
Yeah. So here we go again. Last time I felt kind of obligated to dive into the OGL stuff because it was just such a pervasive issue right now.
Yeah.
So now I feel like we can kind of get more into like the podcast itself. Like who are we? What are we doing? Why are we doing this?
We didn't properly introduce ourselves. We kind of just like went on this Tinder date with y'all and didn't even like introduce us by names. We were just like, this is what we're into. Hey, listen. So yeah, my name is Mike. I'm going to look directly at you. It's going to get intimate. Yeah. So I'm Mike. Nice to meet y'all.
And I'm Brad.
Yeah, so it's just going to kind of talk a little bit about our background and just kind of general how we got into D&D and fantasy and why we do what we do and enjoy. You've been in this game, no pun intended, a lot longer than I have. Yeah. So I actually don't know exactly what age did you start and what edition did you start in? That's actually something I've been curious about.
I started, well, I guess first of all, let me say I've played pretty much every edition of Dungeons and Dragons. So I got started when I was, I think, like 9 or 10, and with one of the box sets, like the basic box sets that came out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it's weird, kind of. It's a story of like 3 sets of brothers.
Wait, there was an original story to Dungeons and Dragons?
No.
Or the box set. Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
My story with Dungeons and Dragons is
your thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So there was a spring break where I was hanging out with these 2 brothers, and they had one of the box sets. I think the box set they had was the Moldvay edition box set.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we played that, and they had Keep on the Borderlands. So we played a little bit of that, with classic adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I went out and bought my own box set after that. And that was, I believe that was the Menser box set.
So was it so with these brothers, was this thing that y'all were just friends and one of you like found this thing out and then kind of introduced the other 2? So were you introduced via 2 other people? Is that what I'm hearing then?
Right. So like the older brother owned the box set, and I was hanging out with the younger brother.
Bad influence. I see.
And then so the younger brother was like, "Hey, check out this thing."
Yeah.
And then the older brother was like, "Hey, I can show you how to play, and I can run an adventure for you."
That's super cool.
Yeah. And then from there, once I bought the box set and started like trying to introduce my friends to it, I found out that one of my other friends and his older brother were already playing, and they had the AD&D hardback books.
Okay.
So I went from one box set to the next box set to the AD&D hardbacks, and then like a year or so later, I met another set of brothers when I was on summer break at my dad's house, and they had the original white box that their dad had given to the oldest of those 2 brothers. So this is now the 3rd set of brothers, and we were already all playing the AD&D out of the the hardbacks.
Yeah.
But when they told me, well, we've got the original box set. This was the original set of rules that our dad used to have. I was like, so we've got to play with those rules now, just to say that we did.
Yeah. So was it? I guess the original D&D was it? It was not super set in stone. Was there like a lot of different rule sets you could play with then, or like?
Oh yeah, well that's a whole nother story, right? So
yeah,
because D&D was originally created by Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, which
cool last name, by the way.
Yeah, everybody's heard of Gary Gygax, but not too many people have heard of Dave Arneson. So they released the original box set. That's what everybody calls the white box. So it was just these little booklets that came in a little box, and then Gary started writing what became Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or AD&D, and those were the hardback books.
And just to put in context, not to put your age on blast, but how old were you at this time and what year was it? I'm actually kind of curious about the whatever C word.
Chronology.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if we're talking like Dave and Gary writing D&D, that was late 70s.
Okay.
So I came around in the 80s. So it was like 1983. I was like 9 years old, and that's when I first got exposed to that first box set. So yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, so that's how they ended up with the box sets, though, like going back to the, Dave and Gary, right?
Yeah.
So Gary started writing the AD&D books that became the hardbacks that most people are familiar with. And then at some point somewhere, somebody made the decision to make that different
Mhm.
than the original game. Like, this Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is different than Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And the reason they did that was to not give royalties to Dave Arneson.
Huh. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. So everybody nowadays gets upset at Wizards of the Coast for doing very corporate-y things.
Yeah.
And Gary was not exactly, warm and fuzzy when it came to, Dave Arneson, apparently.
Is this Gygax character, are they still like a deep part of D&D stuff or Wizards, or I honestly do not know.
They have both since passed away.
Okay,
So,
I wasn't sure. So
yeah.
never mind. I won't speak ill. But I was gonna say, like, maybe someone took the spirit of that and kind of thought the same thing with all the newer stuff nowadays. I have no idea. That's kind of sketchy. I'm not a huge fan of that, but
yeah. So that's where the box sets came from, right? So the box sets were called Basic D&D,
okay.
right? So after there was the original box set, which was D&D, and then the hardbacks were Advanced D&D. And then they came out with a new set of box sets. That's when I started playing. And those new box sets were called Basic D&D. And so Dave Arneson received royalties from the Basic D&D box sets, but he didn't receive royalties from the hardback books. Because Gary argued that they were two different games.
With the same, it's like, yeah, you get Coke royalties, not Coke Zero though. That's a whole different soda. Yeah, that's kind of I didn't realize there was like already a sketchy start to business relations with D&D. By the way, happy almost 40th anniversary of playing D&D.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting, or actually I guess it is 2023 now. So I guess yeah, it has happened or soon
Right.
too.
Yeah, well, I guess spring break I think would be. I want to say it was spring break of '83 when I started playing. So, in a few weeks away from being right at 40 years.
That's crazy. That's so cool that you've been so, I mean, interested in still playing it. Do you have any contact with those old friends of yours still, or no? I wasn't sure if you like ever played D&D with them, when you or an adults or anything like that. But
no, those three sets of brothers never. I haven't had contact with any of them in years. I do have like two friends from like middle school and high school that I gamed with regularly. The guys I played the most D&D with ever, and I stay in touch with at least two of those guys. One of whom I've actually still gamed with whenever he's in the country, because he's in the military, so
okay.
he's not always in the U.S. But when he is in the U.S., we play.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like it, in your childhood, it kind of spread like a virus in a good way, and kind of stuck with you all. And you, I mean, you have, sorry, you have more experience in D&D and playing D&D than I've been alive on this planet.
That's crazy.
This is actually kind of good because you have the old school, you've seen all the editions, you've seen it evolve and stuff like that. I'm very new. I'm very, infatuated with it. But I'm very new. I started just with 5e. I'm a brand new baby to D&D. And I even you started, 10 tactile. You had all the books, you did everything in person, the OG feel of D&D, which I honestly prefer now. In-person games are really good. Harder to line up everyone's schedules, especially when we're adults and have careers and all that stuff. But I started just on online game. I started one of my friends on YouTube was just like, hey, we're doing this thing, D&D. It's on a site called Roll20. And I was just like, okay, yeah, I'll try it out. I had no idea what I was doing. But I mean, he helped me along the way and stuff like that. And I, at first, was kind of just playing it like a chess game or stat kind of video gaming. That's my background is very video game heavy. And then eventually I was like, oh, this is like, yeah, there's rules, but those rules are meant to be, used in a creative way. Like you can literally in this quote video game world that I was thinking of it as, I can literally do anything I want. There are no boundaries for me. It's only set by the person running the game. So if I wanted to, go to the top of this building and see if I can fly, I can try it out. If I wanted to go down the road and instead of going at Hotel A, go to Hotel Bar B, or, it's all open world, depending on your DM. Not every game's the same, obviously. But it was mind blowing that like being a person that also had creative backgrounds, I enjoyed, my time in high school, did some like slight improv-y things and drama stuff. And then being able to eventually get comfortable enough to inject all that kind of like on the spot thinking and like just improv in general and bouncing back and forth between people. I realized very quickly, oh, this is the game for me. It has all those types of aspects of what I like in just game, like video game style / also goofing around with friends, having this crazy open world, and a whole lot of depth. I mean, with all the characters and all the equipment and the builds and the subclasses, I was just like, there's a whole lot of stuff to learn. But it's very enjoyable, the entire experience. So, but yeah, I'm very new to it. I've only been playing, I guess, for like, I want to say a little bit over a 10th of your time. So probably like 6 years now, maybe 6, like somewhere between 4 to 6, I would say. So not a whole lot of time, but again, I'm a person that I have very, very obsessive personality. When I get into something, I will research and develop and like brain the hell out of it. I will research all I can, Google for hours, watch the most niche videos. And that goes with everything. Like I do that with backpacking, with video editing, with all the, anything I've ever been into, I get way too obsessed about it. So very quickly I learned about it, but it's been fun.
So being obsessed with something for 6 years straight, that's like the equivalent of getting a master's degree.
True. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I call it the Google Academy. Anything I need to learn about, I just Google the hell out of it. And I can definitely find my way around any subject matter. So, but yeah, that's my experience. And as far as just like, I guess fantasy in general, I've always been really into fantasy and then like medieval. I mean, I guess with base D&D, kind of the more medieval style. Even when I was a kid, I had, toys and books and art of dragons, of knights, of, anything medieval. I read a lot of the book series Redwall. I did like I had a bunch of play sets of like the towers of castles and knights and stuff like that. Even not quite like miniature size, but I guess this one was like a Fisher Price one. If I showed an image, all the people of my generation would be like, "Oh my god, that's such a nostalgic toy," Right. But yeah, I had dragon books. I had anything medieval. I was just super into, and I guess I don't know what the allure is to like that kind of time period because the real medieval times awful. Right. But like
Black
just
Flag.
like yeah, but like the fantasy of this like kind of like I guess it's just magic is kind of the draw and allure to it. Like yeah, it's kind of based in a real world thing, but just like the magic injected into it and like fabled creatures and stuff like that kind of adds to this just new fantasy world that you can live in. But yeah,
Redwall was like one of your first exposures to fantasy?
As far as like story goes, like having a story that was fantasy based, I did read and watch. I would say one of my first exposures was probably reading wise, book wise. Yeah, that series is what took me. But as far as like viewing, I think I watched the like Disney Merlin or King Arthur thing. And kind of
Sword and Stone?
Sword and Stone, yeah, and other similar things like that when I was younger, and even like I don't know, anything medieval esque. I would try to like watch like any TV shows. There's even one show that I watched that was like, oh my god, I got reminded of this when I was really early aged. It was called, I think it was called Knights of Tyr Nano, and it was like a kids show, and it was like Power Rangers, but it was like medieval Power Rangers. It was so like, I watched a trailer of it recently. Now I'm like, oh my god, that show is so funny, but definitely me when I was that age.
That's
And
hilarious.
so yeah, I was really into any sort of high fantasy medieval stuff back in the day, and being able to play a game in that world was really cool. And even like, I mean, even like video game wise, like Skyrim, I love Skyrim, like stuff like that. It's always been something that I've been really into. I'm not super into like, I mean, I know a lot of people are, but like, space age techie, I know there's Star Citizen is a big thing that's coming out probably soon. And it's like really advanced space warfare. And I like simple, scaled down. I have a sword, I have a shield, maybe some magic. But yeah, being able to play a game like that, especially playing it with friends, was probably one of my most favorite experiences that I've had in the recent years of just like discovering something that was so creative, so adaptable, and just a great time. Like some of my, it's hard to explain some of the things that happen in your game, people that don't play the game with you, because you're like in your mind, you're like, oh, this moment was so cool, it was so awesome, so funny, and then like you explain it to somebody else that wasn't playing it, and it's like, oh my god, this was you had to be there kind of moment. That's another thing I like about D&D is it creates so many moments that are just memorable. Like I can remember things from my first campaign and my second one, and little moments here and there, and I'll talk to those players and I'll be like, oh, remember that time? And they're like, oh my god, that's so funny. But if I try to explain it to Allie, my partner, like she'll just be like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I remember reading or hearing somewhere, and now I want to go find out and see if it's true, that the memories that you make while playing a tabletop role playing game are stored in the same way in the brain as actual real life memories
I can see it. Yeah.
versus memories that are made from like watching media.
Yeah.
So like you're watching a movie or a TV show, you remember those things, but it's not stored in the brain the same way as if you went out and did it in real life.
Right.
Where the events in the tabletop RPG are stored in the same way in the brain as if you did in real life.
Well, I think it's also layered because like you're making that memory with other people outside of the table, but in the table, if you're like really into RP or whatever, you're trying to kind of be that person in a sense. So it's almost like you're living through that experience too. So it's like a dual memory almost, like real life and pseudo, I feel like.
Right.
So
that kind of reminds me of like there's this episode of the original Star Trek when Jean-Luc Picard, Captain of the Enterprise, gets zapped by some alien technology and lives a whole nother life throughout the course of the one episode.
Oh, geez.
So he's like a totally different person on a totally different planet. And of course, the Twilight Zone kind of plot twist at the end was this alien technology was a way for this race that died off, hundreds of years ago, to show whoever encountered it what their society was like.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was like a time capsule from this lost planet, and Picard just happened to access it, and then he lived an entire life like virtually. While he was in his real life, he was unconscious for like an hour, but in that time,
but he felt like there was like years and years and years, is what you're saying, is what he felt like he went through.
right, like fell in love, got married, grew old.
Oh, I was about to ask that. Like, did he have a whole family? Like, then he like gets ripped out of that, and then now everything sucks because he misses Maribeth from the memory or from the dream or whatever.
Yeah, it was something like that. It's been years since I've watched that, but yeah, so it's kind of like that. Like, these characters and these campaigns that we play, it's like living a whole different world,
with which
your
is kind of one of the reasons why you play it. I mean,
right, exactly.
Kind of want to do, try something out, be someone that you're not. I mean,
yeah.
So, but really, I just have to comment on that Star Trek episode. That sounds terrifying, and also like a really scary what could possibly happen on like crazy psychedelics. I feel like as for somebody out there, there's someone that went on a, I don't know, ayahuasca trip that was like, oh my God, I have a family, I gotta go back. Yeah, that's scary, terrifying stuff, but interesting. I definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was going to ask you, because you mean video games have been your bread and butter for years now. Mm-hmm. So you're like the gamer of gamers. At least in my mind, like my mind is like I know somebody who's like the ultimate gamer. He's got a YouTube channel and everything. He's like, so I think of you as like the video game guy. Like you're my go-to video game guy.
I guess, yeah. In the scale, like percentage of our life, like the way that, and how old were you? Sorry, when you said 1983, you were like
9 or 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So not even double digits yet. Same percentage of my life, I would say, has been video games. I started very early, with Nintendo and all the PlayStations and all the iterations, but constantly, and it became a problem sometime, growing up and not doing homework and stuff like that, but constantly playing games, constantly going through stories, constantly, Final Fantasy was one of my original favorite series. And just these, like, any open world or RPG game has been and always will be at the moment my favorite style of game. Going through a story, going through a different world, realizing things about the characters in them, really growing attached to their stories and stuff like that has always been something that I've been really, really into. And probably honestly what drives me the most towards this game is creating the stories and observing the ones around you, while playing outside of the game, while playing with good friends and having a good time.
Right.
Yeah. So, Sorry, I cut you off. What was the question? You said gamer of games, and I was just like, video games. Yes.
Well, yeah. Well, and that was actually my question. Was like, what video game RPGs have you played that really resonated with you and kind of drew you or connected you to Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, I would definitely, yeah.
Final Fantasy, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that originally, specifically 7 and 8. Actually, 7 and 9 were my favorite ones, and both of those are 7's kind of a more futuristic setting. I think I liked 9's aesthetic the most, which was definitely not as futuristic. But it was it still had, in fact, I would say it was almost equal to kind of the normalized D&D setting now. Like, yeah, there are firearms, and yeah, there are like skyships, but there's not like cell phones, Right. So that I do like the I don't even know what to call it. It's like a half high fantasy, half medieval, but there's also technologies that are there that, weren't in medieval times. But yeah, Final Fantasy definitely was one of my top.
I guess they would call that science fantasy.
Yeah. Or maybe even like kind of steampunky, maybe.
Yeah. Or Arcana Punk is another variation on
Ooh, I like that. That sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, so it's instead of steam, it's magic, right? So,
that makes sense.
Like what's the anime, like Full Metal Alchemist kind of thing, right? Like there's
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess
like machines that run on magic or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Which is very much like kind of Yeah, kind of like in the whole Final Fantasy lore is like Magicka stones power a lot of things. They call it Magicka. They have to add an A. I don't know if there's like a copyright to magic, but which maybe, I don't know. That was another thing, another game that got me into a lot of this kind of like setting as well. Was I played it way before D&D, and actually, or pretty early on. I might have been just barely double digits. I started Magic the Gathering at a pretty young age, and kind of the same story that you were introduced by someone older that kind of could, chaperone you in the game a little bit and kind of show you the ropes. That was my best friend's cousin, who was older by, I don't know, like 6 years or something like that. But he had all these magic cards, and he kind of like played against us, beat us every time, and taught us how to play. And then eventually me and my friend Nathan would play all the time together. And it was really fun to have, even though we had video games, to have something else too that kind of explored more. There were boundaries of the game, obviously, but like, oh, I could make, he made a squirrel deck. And I think I talked to you about this, where the squirrels like powered each other up, and they had like 1,000 tokens that were like 1,000 thousands with attack and defense because they powered each other. And I was like, all right, I'm never going to beat this. It's so funny though. I love it. Even I would even read like the little stories and descriptions on the cards and stuff. And I know now there's even crossover of, since it's all wizards, of some of the stuff from Magic in some D&D campaigns, like Strixhaven, the one that I'm running. I guess is fully like, it's Magic the Gathering cards and settings and stuff like that just kind of took over to that.
Yeah, because you got, what is it? There's something 3 now, because there's Ravnica, Theros, and Strixhaven, right? Are the all Magic the Gathering settings that have crossed over with D&D.
Yeah.
And then they came out with Forgotten Realms cards for Magic the Gathering, right?
Oh, so they're going back the other direction.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense to cross things back and forth if it's all your, IP, and can maybe cross people over to the other game too.
So as far as like video games, one thing that that I always never made sense to me, right? As far as like story wise, which I completely understand, programming, right? Because you can't build a game where you can literally do anything, right? There's got to be a boundary somewhere. But like, you're playing a video game, like, I don't know if you remember the old Fable games.
Oh, right. Yeah. I played those too. Yeah.
And so your character can do all these crazy things when they're in combat, jump up in the air and, swing a, two-handed sword down from, 6 feet in the air and, come smashing down on a target. But then you're walking around town and there's a fence that's like 2 feet high.
Yeah.
And you can't hop over that fence because that fence is not merely a fence. It's the border of the game.
It's the end. Yeah. The invisible wall is the enemy of every gamer when you're trying to explore, for sure.
Right.
And yeah, just to limit and just to not break, right? Which honestly, you just kind of opened my mind a little bit, is probably why I like D&D so much. A lot of the video gaming content that I would do, or just even just goofing around, having fun with my friends, we try to break games. We try to go outside the borders. We try to do weird things with objects you can interact. Oh, I can pick up this bucket. Here, let me put it on the shopkeep's head so he can't see me steal his objects. Actually worked, by the way. Stuff like that. And so I guess when there's a game that doesn't have invisible walls, like D&D, that's something that really, really, really spoke to me and really drew me to this style of game. Was no actual boundaries. I mean, the mental boundaries of your DM, but you can break those, whatever. Yeah.
It's just when you break the mental barriers of the DM, then you run into the DM's emotional barriers when they get, now your friend is mad at you because you broke his game.
Instead of crashing the video game, you're crashing the wrath of the DM onto you, the players, eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you see like on like forums and Reddit and all that sort of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
people are ranting about, I have this player who did this thing and it ruined my game. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, there's always, I mean, with a game that has, that's another thing is like the language of some things in D&D is kind of vague enough that it's kind of up to, I guess like session 0 or setting ground rules of how things will interact and stuff like that. Like if, for example, you have, I think it's is it Kalash? No, it's not Kalash Start. There's I think it's a race actually. Oh yeah, the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. Where they can just basically, I think it's Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. They can just basically read thoughts like all the time. How do you have a mystery in your game that's not just being read? And how do I mean, you can't have every single bad guy or person just wearing a ring of mind shielding, right? That's just kind of like, I don't know. But at the same time, like, you know, always casting detect thoughts or always casting scry or always, you know, having teleport or always having, you know, all these interactions of spells that could be possibly broken. Like there's one that I saw and I didn't do this. I try not to break like mechanical battle things. I kind of like, you know, just talk my way or see if my DM will. I like illusionary magic because that's up to my DM and how well it works a lot of times. But like I would see online where, oh yeah, this chronology wizard can make a spell mote to be cast instantly. Therefore, you can cast the ritual of Tiny Hut and then cast it instantly in combat and then have like an impenetrable fortress mid-combat of just, like, you know, poking your head out, slinging a spell and going back in. Stuff like that where I'm just like, you're kind of doing it on purpose if you're doing it that way, you know?
right.
But there's limitations, I feel like, to what you should do as a player, but I don't know.
Well, but all of that though is what makes it interesting because, you know, because you can push the boundaries and do things in D&D that you could never do in a video game.
Yeah.
But then that actually has to lead to real life communication.
Right. Which is, which I was saying is like session 0 ground rules or like, you know, readjusting things as long as it's like a conversation and like, and maybe there's going to be like one hurt player that was like, I was basing my whole build around this overpowered thing. It's like, well, I mean, you know that it's just going to trivialize every single combat. So you're not going to make it, you're going to make it less fun for the rest of the players. You're going to, you know, outshine them or, you know, just make it so they can't do anything. The only thing that I like recent that I've kind of revised was like, and this is kind of it's been talked about on a lot of videos, it's like overpowered spell is, it's actually something from Strixhaven. So I got it right away. It's called Silvery Barbs. I feel like stuff like that, where it's like, it counts as crit protection. Like if someone rolls a natural 20, you can just say Silvery Barbs and they have to re-roll and take the lower one. It's a reaction spell. Yep. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
but it's also one of my players who loves it.
Yeah, it's insanely powered. It kind of overshadows a lot of other spells that are more powerful or like higher, you know, levels. But the thing that we're starting to get to like level 10 in my campaign. And the thing that I realized, like, oh, these, you know, these monsters that have legendary resistances won't matter anymore as much because Silvery Barbs, a level 1 spell, can remove one of their legendary resistances, like most of the time. And so I kind of made this like adjustment, and it's always good to, you know, kind of homebrew things, I feel like, but I made this adjustment of like, cool, if you are, let's say, casting polymorph on the big bad to turn him into a goldfish, he resists it, and then you cast Silvery Barbs to, you know, redo the saving throw. It's got to be a Silvery Barbs of the same level of the spell you cast that they're trying to do. So it'd have to be a Silvery Barbs level 4 for polymorph or something like that. Or is it a 5th level spell? I forget already.
Yeah, I think polymorph's 5th level.
So yeah, it'd have to be a 5th level Silvery Barbs or, you know, something similar to that. Just to balance it out. I don't know, because it's wildly known right now as like a problematic overpowered spell. Kind of like how Healing Spirit was when it first came out, where people would just do the what's it called? Put your left foot in, put your right foot out.
The hokey pokey.
The hokey pokey. They would just go back in and forth, doing 20d6 healing every round, and yeah. So,
The healing hokey pokey.
yeah, the healing hokey pokey. Yeah, I overall, I would say like my favorite aspects of the game and how I play is like, and I guess this is a good lead into this question with you too, is my personal preference of the game is like, I love the fact that it's open world, and I'm really into combat. I like combat a lot, but I think the most enjoyment I get out of D&D is having, I like comedy a lot. I like laughing. I like improv, running off or like bouncing off my players with each other, and just like random things that happen. Those are the ones that the memories that kind of stick with me the most, is like, decent RP of like in character, but like having just like improv between players and then building a story off of that is always like been my highest tier aspect of the game for me. I don't know what kind of games you've been running lately, or what like your kind of favorite style of gameplay is.
I would agree. I'd say that collaborative storytelling is what, is the thing that draws me to the game most of all. That, the old adage that, like, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Like no campaign survives contact with the players. The the fact that I have an idea of this cool thing, and then I throw it out there, and then see what my players do with it, and they make it even cooler. And I was like, well, that's not what I had in mind, but I like where this is going. And
Yeah.
and that there's excitement to that, and there's surprise to that. Even with the best laid campaigns, you're going to find like really interesting and crazy things happening. And and I think that's another point where people struggle, is they feel like, well, the players are messing up my story, right? That seems to be like kind of a underlying tone to a lot of the the problematic comments that people come to online with, like, how do I fix this player?
Yeah.
And you can't fix that player. You fix your own expectations of, these players are not, um they're not pre-programmed bots in your world,
Right.
your video game.
Yeah.
They are real life people, and they want to have fun in this game as much as you do. And I think that's I think that's actually the bad design with Silvery Barbs, is that it doesn't reinforce the tone that you want to have in the game. Like, a good rule is going to either reinforce the tone of the setting, or it's going to reinforce the tone of the gameplay, right? Like, that's why, like, a lot of old school Renaissance players who like playing an original D&D or some variation on those, they love the idea of, gold coins to experience points. So because it sets an expectation of a certain style of play, that these players are going to be motivated by money because they need the gold to get experience. So they're going to keep pushing themselves deeper and deeper into the dungeon, or deeper and deeper into the crazy heist, because they want that gold. Right?
That sounds very like MMO like. Like you're just trying to grind it out.
Right. And it creates a certain style of play, right? So, and so good rules are going to either reinforce that setting, or they're going to reinforce that style of play. And I think that's the problem with Silvery Barbs, is it takes you out of the narrative of the story. Like, I don't even know, like, is like my player who uses Silvery Barbs, he flavors it as kind of a time manipulation thing, like Doctor Strange with the time.
Okay.
Like manipulating time and kind of rewinding things and resetting it. But there's no real explanation as to what Silvery Barbs is supposed to be in the world. Like, what are you doing that's taking away this role and giving advantage to somebody else, kind of thing?
Right. So like the way that I thought about, I mean, maybe there's an explanation that I just haven't read yet, but the way that I thought about it was it's in the book itself, it's given kind of automatically to the campus that's about like incomancy and like poetry and like kind of more bardic type of artistry stuff like that song. So like I think like silvery tongue, like you're lashing out with a barb, like silvery barb, like it's almost like what's the cantrip that bards get?
Oh, the vicious mockery.
Yeah, so I kind of almost see it as like they're weaving their words in a magical way, but at the same time, I didn't look at a description of it. But yeah, it seems. I mean, the time thing kind of makes sense if it was like chronomancy or chronergy. I guess it's called in this, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very strong thing.
And the other thing that I think it doesn't, I don't see how it fits the narrative of a setting. Of course, like I said, I haven't played Strixhaven, I haven't read Strixhaven, so maybe it is woven into that college. But beyond that, it also doesn't really reinforce the collaborative gameplay, right?
Mhm.
Because it's more of it. Because I think what really pisses people off is not that it's necessarily overpowered, is it sucks some of the fun out of the game.
Yeah.
You know,
It
as a
literally
DM,
makes it so as a DM, it makes it so you can't crit.
right?
That's
Yeah,
what I'll say. Like any of those like massive hits that kind of can sway a battle, a level 1 spell can just take care of.
right. And that doesn't support a narrative either, because when the DM rolls a crit, you know, that's a dramatic moment, right? And when you think about storytelling, you think about like upbeats and downbeats, right?
Yeah.
You know, so the DM rolls a crit and, you know, drops one of the party members. That's a big downbeat. Like, oh no, we're gonna lose
Mhm.
this battle. And that's something I look for when I'm running, you know, combat. Is I look for that moment where my players are looking at each other, thinking, "Is this it? Is this the one we're gonna lose?"
Mhm.
And I know I'm doing a good job running combats when I get that reaction more often than not.
Yeah. I mean
You know that
that's part of the fun is having that danger and you know, not being I mean being attached to your character and obviously getting sad about, you know, if you lose them, but at the same time like it's part of the game. Like there's death
right,
mechanics, there's death saving throws, there's spells that you can raise each other, but I mean if you
right.
don't have the right spell components or whatever, but yeah, having that danger there is what makes it fun. If it's and I'm having sometimes a issue with that as well in my game, but the opposite direction. Like I need to get better at just being like I need to detach myself from the characters because I'm just like I want them to win. Like I want them to have fun. Therefore, they need to win. Whereas like some of the, I mean, the players, one of them specifically, who is actually the person that got me into D&D to start with, is like straight up told me like he's into chaos. He loves D&D because it's chaos. I do too. He's more chaotic than me though, but he's just like, hey, um, if you want to like just gun for my character because he's a wizard and the enemies are smart, I'm fine with dying. I'm like, okay, I'll get there eventually too, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, it's having the danger is part of the fun for sure.
Oh yeah,
It sounds like you're doing a good job of that balancing act.
yeah. Well, and it sounds like you're doing a good job of like rooting for your players, which is an important aspect of being a DM.
Yeah.
Uh, because you
There's
know
so many people that I see online that are like, it's me versus the players, like PvP. I don't see it that way.
Uh, and for me, I was like you when I was first DMing for, you know, for years, where I would I would play with a DM screen and I would fudge rolls
Mm,
because I was rooting for my players and because I wanted them to succeed. So like if I rolled a crit, I wouldn't, you know,
yeah.
I might, and
Oh no, I rolled a 5.
or you know, kind of manipulating the dice to you know, kind of force the outcome I wanted,
Yeah.
because I wanted the players to have a good time. I wanted the characters to win. I wanted the story to move forward.
Hmm.
Because I'm, you know, once you're several sessions in, you're as a DM, you're just as invested as in the characters and their story as they are.
Yeah.
So, but at some point along the way, I decided, no, I'm not going to use a DM screen anymore. I'm just going to roll out in the open,
Mm-hmm.
and that made the game so much more fun because I had
No
to
take backsies.
right, I had to go with that dice roll,
Yeah.
uh, and that I think challenges your improv skills. You know,
Mm-hmm.
to like so when things get really desperate, you're not changing the dice in order to make sure the players win. You're
Mm-hmm.
trying to come up with a realistic answer as to what could these characters do to get out of this situation, and so you try to narratively throw them a bone versus like hiding the dice rolls.
Yeah, which I feel like that's like I feel like that's got to be a veteran move. Not using a DM screen, because the person that I was just talking about, this chaotic person that got me into D&D, he the last 2 times I've played with him, he as well doesn't use a DM screen. And I feel like there are those kind of like early feelings, whether it be a new DM or as a new player or a new group, where there's a role that happens where maybe you're like thinking like, "Ugh, did they cheat? Did they say it hit when it didn't?" Like, and there's the kind of this competitive nature. Whereas the one time that I did a one, I think I mentioned it last time. I did a one shot that was like a summer camp 80s thriller type of thing.
Sure, kind of
Um,
thing.
and that one, I just did. It was at a friend's house, and it was after Halloween. I didn't have anything. I used some of his dice. I didn't have a DM screen or anything like that. And so yeah, rolling out in the open, um, it removes that feeling if any player has it of like, oh, are they fudging either up or down? Are they doing whatever? Um, it removes any of that. Definitely helps force the improv skills, as you were saying, but also like it adds more stakes, and it also makes you, instead of like this separation, literally a wall dividing you between the players, you are part of the just dice and the chaos of the game. You're part of the game more so, I would say, than
Right.
with a screen in front of you. Which is honestly, I'm gonna start doing that, I think. Yeah. If they die, they die. So
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, the only time that I'll roll where the players can't see it is if I'm making some sort of check for them,
okay.
right? Like if because sometimes you don't want to give things away by saying,
Make a
"Oh,
perception check.
you need to make a perception check," right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you handle
Oh,
that.
everything's fine. You
Yeah.
see nothing. Yeah.
Uh, and and sometimes you can do that where the player rolls their own perception check, and you say, well, you think they believe you, or you
Yeah.
you think that everything's safe. You don't notice anything dangerous in that room, right?
Yeah.
And a good player kind of plays along with that, right?
Hmm.
But there's also times where you want to like ratchet up the tension, or the pace of the game's getting slow, and you want to you say like, all right, what is your perception bonus again? And then you roll the dice and you don't let them see it, you know,
Yeah.
and that can like ratchet up the tension. They're like, oh no, what's going on?
Yeah. That's something I have kind of utilized, because yeah, I luckily I play with players that are really good, not about metagaming, and they can separate character and player knowledge. But I'll still the I mentioned it last time, above VTT, the tabletop that I use for my online play, has all my characters listed out, and they're like passive investigation, perceptions, and stuff like that. And I can even click it to do a specific role that doesn't get broadcasted to them. So yeah, I can do that same exact feeling where I don't want to be, even though I know that they're great players at not doing it. There's still going to be like if you say make a perception roll, they roll a 5. Oh yeah, everything seems fine, and then keep going on. And then there's still even if they're a great player, in the back of their mind they're going to be like, well, I gotta look around. I gotta make a reason to look around again. What's the reason? There's something, instead of like waiting for this impending doom type of thing. But yeah, no
And
DM screen.
that's like the game that you played when you were here, when you played with my players,
Hmm.
and there was the one player who was playing, you know, basically a fake character, right?
Hmm.
So he was kind of a DM plant for that first session of the campaign, and nobody caught it, but they kept asking questions about things, and they kept rolling really low on like their insight and perception.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept like, and so I was telling them, yeah, you're pretty sure these are like fey creatures, um, because I had set up the world where they didn't know what gnomes were, because gnomes had,
Oh,
you know, gnomes were something that had been lost to time or whatever.
yeah.
uh, and and they make a medicine check on this dead body, and you're like, yeah, it's definitely not an elf. It's too short to be an elf. It must be like a fey creature, like a fairy of some kind.
Yeah.
Uh, and then because the plant character was trying to manipulate them into wiping out this little group of gnomes. So the players thought the gnomes were like these dark fey bad guys that they needed to take out, and nobody
So,
noticed that they were rolling so poorly the whole time.
yeah.
And so I keep feeding them misinformation based on the fact that their rolls were so bad. And the only character that rolled well on one of those checks was the character that was trying to mislead everybody.
Okay. That's amazing. Well, so
So
wait, when I was playing that game, I played one session of it when we first entered this. It was the gnomes were in the cave. Is that what the where the gnomes were? Or is this something different?
right, yeah, the dark fae that the cleric was trying to get you guys to eliminate. They
So
they
when
they were
I when I a lot of times I mesh my own humor into my character and I say something out loud. I think I mentioned at one time, like when there was something was running away, I was like, "Are we the bad guys?" I think I said something along those lines. Uh, that's funny that I didn't even like. Yeah, I didn't. I had a bad perception in real life, I guess. I was on the verge, but not quite meeting the check.
yeah, yeah, you had picked up a hint there, right? You
Yeah,
were on the scent. I mean, if you had come back the next session, you probably would have figured it out.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, they didn't figure out until like the third session that, oh, all those things we killed upstairs, those were gnomes, and
Mm,
they weren't really the bad guys. They were, we got played, because my players said they wanted a grim dark setting, like, oh, what's the video game, Dark Souls.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I came up with the idea of like this one player, not playing the character he wanted to play, but playing a, kind of a setup character.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, so he named that character Patches.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so that
Yeah.
all worked out. It was just a fun thing, but that's just an example of like, you know, letting the dice tell the story, right?
Yeah. Which I'm
Um,
I'm super down for. Like, I mean, again, this is my first game that I've run, a full game campaign that I've run, and I'm super into, yeah, the collaborative storytelling and the like kind of adding things that make sense. And I've tried to inject something of each of my characters' story into this world, and it's kind of spun off into their own little side quests that they've completed or are pursuing. And it also develops a relationship between the characters in game, to like really kind of, because that's a big thing as well, is like if you don't have it at the very beginning of a campaign, like them knowing each other, what's to keep a group sticking together, logistically, and unless at the very beginning it's like, yeah, you're a band of mercenaries that have been grouped together for years now, working together. Cool, that's a relationship. My setting was you're at school, you see this one person, and then eventually I made all their stories kind of connect from the back end to make sense and have them like, oh, okay, we need to do this together. And they created this cool collaborative storytelling where I have the bones of Strixhaven, but most of the adventuring took outside of the campus, underneath, the worlds, or some soon to be in the sky, like all these other things that aren't part of the thing, but have been driven by the players and what they created, and then what I made for the world via them. Yeah, definitely one of
yeah,
my favorite aspects is that collab thing.
yeah, for sure. And it sounds like in your game, like I know last time you said you weren't overly impressed with the Strixhaven book,
Hmm.
but it sounds like you've made the best of it by, you know, just taking the bare bones of that adventure and, doing what a DM does, right? Just
Yeah.
build a world, like spiral out from the players. Like, all right, here's your players, here's the setting, and we can just gonna keep building the world around them and spiral that narrative
Yeah.
out center.
And I've learned very quick what I enjoy and what I want to change and what I like to do. I've realized I'm a very, very heavy improv DM, that I'll make things kind of on the spot for the players. And then afterwards I'll be like, okay, got to add this town, got to make some sort of connection point. Oh, I mentioned this character. They're going to be, someone that they're going to look for. And it's worked out so far, I think. But like I would say, to put an example, and again, this is like talking about a game to somebody that isn't part of your game, so it's not as grand feeling, but having this school setting, and it's very Hogwarts-like. In fact, the book and story itself, it's almost mimicking Harry Potter. There's an evil guy that was there back in the day that's trying to do bad stuff at the school or whatever, and you're trying to find them. And the only thing is that, these 5 people, or in my game, 5 people, they're all the chosen ones. They're all the Harry Potter. But like, one of my characters is a fairy from the Fey realm that, is trying to find new type of magic to bring back home in order to help the war between their kingdoms. And so that's why they're going to school. And I, as a DM, was like, cool, I'm going to, because they have this backstory and because they're doing this, there's nothing here that really would entice their character a whole lot besides just going to school. Instead, I'm going to create these side plots and these side characters and these packs of like evil creatures promising magic, or, you heard a story of these adventurers that became, I had these like adventurers that once they passed away became part of this myconoid colony. So these myconoids were taking over these past adventurers' bodies, inhabiting them, and doing this extra magic using their essence inside. And then they went on this adventure to go find out that kind of magic. And then they were in a fight club that wasn't part of the school book, and they got extra power that way. And so they're getting all these things because I, injected the story for them, and connected it with all the other characters. But all of the more enjoyable parts, for me at least, has been like taking the characters of what they want and what they want to do for their character, and be like, how can I make this work in a story setting, and put a point in the world where they can start, exploring those options, instead of just like, oh, you wanted to, find new magic to bring back, even if it's volatile and dangerous. Yeah, just study. Yeah, you'll get there eventually. I don't know. You're a monk. You can't learn magic. So, I mean, good luck. Instead, I, kind of made a very homebrewy feats and packs for them to actually feel like they're achieving what they wanted for their character.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's great. That's great game design. And that's the thing, is like, we think of like, especially with the recent OGL stuff, right? There's like the real game designers who work there, and then there's the rest of us. But the reality is, if you're playing D&D, you're designing on some level.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody's a game designer to a certain extent, because not all the rules, or not every situation is going to have a rule for it, right? So you're going to have to come up with answers on the fly, or make stuff up between sessions to figure out, okay, how do I make this thing do that?
Mm-hmm.
So like, everybody's a game designer who plays this game.
Yeah. And I've also realized, like, now we're level 9 now. I feel like you also have to be more, as a DM, more malleable. Once players get like spells that can modify the world or just reality, you're kind of having to like, improv a lot more too. So that's kind of been on the back of my mind too, is like, you have to be adaptable in this game. Going back to you talking about people online, how to fix a player or whatever like that. It's it's I think once you realize, I mean, there's some games where you can have like a PvP feeling,
Right.
And when you have a big bad evil guy that's you know, made, it's like your baby, you want them to have at least a round of combat, and they try to take it out in one round and they have the power to do so. It might feel a little bit bad, but at the same time, it's like you're you're making this world so that, you know, you can live through your players to go explore and have them be excited about it. So that it's like, you know, it can kind of roll off of each other. Yeah, that's what I've had the most enjoyment out of, is like when I'm doing something in game and I think something's cool, or I set something up and I wait for them to find it out, and then they have the, you know, the, oh my gosh, you know, that kind of reaction, or like hand palm, you know, palm to the face, like, oh my god, why didn't I see that type of feeling? I'm just like, yes, I did it. That's been my best kind of DM feeling, I would say. Being able to get that kind of expression.
Yeah, well, and that, coming back around to like how good game design reinforces the setting, or it reinforces the style of play, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's one thing. Like with fifth edition, we've added so much to the game compared to the original versions of the game, that you know, and there's a lot of good things that have been added over the years, that creates more player choice and more customization and all those sort of things, like skills and feats and all that. But there is something valuable about the old school style of play, like you're talking about, like how do you, like figuring out how these characters know each other.
Hmm.
Like it's really cool to have a session zero and plan that all out ahead of time, and you get a good solid foundation to start a campaign on. That's great. But there's also something fun. Like I remember running Advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, and your first couple of levels, were really like, like bringing the band together kind of stories.
Yeah.
And so it was, because most of the time people just showed up with their six ability scores and a name. Pretty much all you had to go with at first level. The wizard had like one spell, and the fighter was good with a few weapons or whatever. But
Hmm.
it was very bare bones. So there weren't backgrounds and feats and all these things to kind of flesh out your character. So you actually fleshed out your character through the first couple levels of play. So like level one play, level two play was mostly, like I said, that bringing the band together kind of story.
Hmm.
So you at the DM, those low levels of play, you were focused on creating a narrative that would drive these kind of chaotic weirdos um, into a unified group. And then like the next tier of play was dungeon design and exploring the world. And then the next tier of play was the big epic save the world kind of story.
Yeah.
you
Which,
know
by the way, if I don't know, multiverse theory, but like if D&D is just one realm in general, man, that world has been in trouble so many times at this point. Like, and also there's so many god tier powered people. You know, any level 20 druids out there just living forever. You know, or
right.
monks too, I guess. Yeah, that was one. I mean, I didn't have to think about it too much because it's just a school setting, but I did have to think. Yeah, I had to think about why they would stick together instead of just being like, you know, oh, I'm just gonna study. Oh, you're gonna go off into the canyon of the dead. No, I'm good. I'm gonna go to herbology. You know, like, you know, what can make them friends. So I kind of figured it out, but also the players are nice enough not to be like, you know, always
My
splitting
character
each
would do that.
other. Yeah, yeah. So they were
Yeah.
like, they're helping me out too a little bit. So,
Yeah, and
but
that's metagaming too, right? Like
yeah,
metagaming
in a
is
good
not
way though.
great. Yeah,
Yeah,
metagaming is not always a bad thing. Like
yeah.
metagaming can be a good thing when you're trying to figure out. It's important for us to stay together, and this is what the DM has had prepped for this session. We don't
Yeah.
want to go completely off the rails. Those kind of things. Those are good players too, who can metagame in a way that um, helps drive the story forward as well.
Hmm. Yeah. I think, actually, now that I think about it, I think I did do like some weird event, like school event, where they were paired with partners, and like it paired them together. I was like, this is an easy way for them to find each other in the crowd of students, right? Like, yeah. So, but yeah, the good kind of metagaming definitely helps out your DMs. Be nice. Be nice to them. It also just drives, the gameplay that matters, instead of just like leaving. Oh, I'm just gonna leave to my apartment. Anyways, so I have rice and beans. I cook thoroughly. Do I have any chicken in my refrigerator? And then like, another person's like, all right, well, we're gonna find the bandits. And then you have these two, like, I would hate to be, if that ever happened to me, I would hate that to happen. If there was someone so deep into not keeping the party together, just to have a realistic experience, I don't know.
Yeah. If you want that real of an experience, just
play The Sims. Live life. Play The Sims. Yeah. Yeah. I think. I kind of talked about all the things that I feel like I've talked about a lot of things I like about D&D. There's hard to pick one specific thing, but yeah, I guess I kind of landed on the collaborative improv storytelling. As far as campaigns go, like if it's just a one shot, I like having improv moments, but like obviously like it's kind of more I guess maybe original style, where it was kind of dungeon delvey or just kind of gritty and just like get out there, cause a ruckus and have fun. Don't care about like what your favorite smell was as a child.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah. Well, and so you also mentioned like playing Final Fantasy, and now you're running Strixhaven. What would you say is your like subgenre of fantasy? Is it that Arcana punk kind of on the verge of technology kind of world? Is that your kind of jam?
Yeah, I guess kind of, because like it's nice to have a mix of like there's answers for things that aren't just purely like magic. So like if you have a travel distance that is like continent to continent, and let's say there's no one in the party that is a wizard, and there's no one in town that is a wizard that can cast teleport or something like that. Getting an airship not only is cool mechanically, it's cool aesthetically, like thinking about like, wow, you're above this world that most people are just walking around on the ground. And then you can have like an air battle, something to change it up. Right. And even in one of the campaigns I'm playing right now, it's almost even more, it's definitely way more steampunk-ish. And my DM is great. He's really into the collaborative things. I don't know what his plan was at the very beginning. It was just a desert land that we were trying to regrow back the nature or water. Basically I was like, oh, do Warforged exist? Can they? And they was like, oh yeah, sure. You're a Warforged. They're like, cool. Can I have a truck? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. That's how you're going around the desert trying to go from place to place. I'm like, cool. And eventually I was like a Hexblade Warlock, and I was like, can my Hexblade be like, eventually like a Gunblade from Final Fantasy? And he's like, yeah, yes, it can. And I'm like, sweet. So it became very quickly like collaborative in the sense of like, I don't know what his original plans were. If it was just, kind of medieval, or if it was kind of steampunky. But it turned more into like a Mad Max setting slash 5e. Yeah. Which it's really fun. And we've had airships and yeah.
I was going to say, that sounds very Mad Max. Like,
yeah. Yeah. And there's been like, oh man, it's been a crazy ride. And like, I don't have to get into it, but like, there's even been like time warps and multiverse things that have happened, and now we are going back to, we actually cause problems because there's this one magic item where it's like beans that you can plant and they can be different things, and we found that one of them was eggs that could make your strength go up by 1 point permanently. And we're like, oh great. And we tried it twice and we got the worst roll possible, which spawned a pyramid that inside had a mummy lord. And we did that twice. So we're like, all right. And then that became like one of the biggest, like big bad evil things in the world too. So something we did created like the end boss of his campaign, which again, collaborative storytelling on point. It was really fun.
That's cool. That sounds like is it the magic beans magic item?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a randomizer. There, it could be like random creatures or effects, I think. But then, yeah, there's one that's like eggs. That I think it's eggs. Maybe he reflavored it to be eggs, but like you eat it and then you get a +1 to your strength permanently. And we're like, let's just get strong. And then we like did it. We spawned a pyramid that we kind of peered inside and sensed very strong evil. Couldn't go in there yet at that level. We were like level like 3. And then later on we're like, you know what? It can't happen twice, right? And so we did it again. And it happened again. And then, yeah, we were gone in the Fey realm for a while, came back, and then like, oh, these things took over the world. Great. Yeah.
Or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, again, another aspect of collaborative storytelling that I found really, really fun. To that, I mean, and that's a big leap too. That was like, he took what the players wanted, what I wanted, what the other players wanted, injected it into the world, and then turned like the big bad evil guy from something that we did. Like that's fully like, yeah, it was really, really cool to have that experience as a player.
You made his job as DM super easy. You just like,
I guess so. Yeah. We're all chaotic enough that he's like, well, I was going to write something for you guys, but you did it. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
he gets all the credit.
That's definitely another way I used to play, because, you know, when I was growing up, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have access to all these, you know, third-party books and all these options. So it was harder to get like good adventures.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of times where I'd come up with a bad guy, and I would come up with that like how the band came together story, like just to get all the players connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would like throw out like a couple like mysterious hints and just watch what they did. And eventually they would come up with their own conspiracy theories. And I would just, whichever one I liked best, be like, that's the hook. That's where we're going.
So not to that extent. I've done something similar though. I've done like, this was for the one shot. I had on the moment, I was just like, oh man, I need traps. So I didn't know what to think about at the on the spot. So I was just like, yeah, there's a scorch mark in the middle of this carpet here in this room that you're trying to find this witch in. And I was waiting for them to try something interesting. And then I was like, yeah, that worked. It opened up a portal, you know, like that kind of thing where it's like, I didn't have an answer. I was waiting until like maybe they thought of something that was cool that would probably work for something. Right. Yeah. I like that a lot. That's funny that you did something like that. I didn't realize. Yeah. That was like a common thing. I was just like scrambling. I was like, oh no, I need something else other than just another battle encounter. Cool. Right. You did it. Oh, I had that in my head the whole time, you know? Right. Yeah. It was really fun, but.
Yeah, I guess I would say like my favorite subgenre of fantasy, I guess I have two. Like I like the dark fantasy stuff. So like when my started this campaign and my players said, yeah, we want to do something like grimdark. I'm like, totally my wheelhouse. Let's go. Let's make this world as creepy as freaking possible.
Yeah. And I wish I could play with you regularly and you weren't across the states, because I mean I feel like my character would fit in very well with the setting.
Oh, the character you made for that one time you were here. I love that character. I want to steal that character and play that character.
Make it an NPC. Go for it.
And then I guess we should tell people what that is, because now they're going to be like, well, what was the character?
Oh, yeah. Basic was it was a changeling. Is it undead warlock? I think.
Right. Yeah.
I randomized it, and I was a grave cleric at first, and I was like, D&D Beyond wasn't working, so I was like, I'm just going to be a warlock because I can just Eldritch Blast stuff and figure it out. And so yeah, basically, I was just being creepy, and I was like going to all these like dead bodies and changing my face to their face, and kind of like like a ventriloquist, almost like giving them a story and a personality, but as my own person, and just going around and collecting stories is what I called it.
Yeah,
And
I thought that was
whenever,
super creepy. I love that.
yeah, and whenever one of the other players was in trouble, I was just like, "Oh, I collect your story now too, huh? Not quite yet. All right." It was really fun to play something like that. And I'm a huge fan. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this. Dark Souls is definitely one of my favorite video games as well. It has some crazy like lore videos. I highly suggest anyone out there into Dark Souls. This is a shout out. Vati Vidya on YouTube. Awesome person that deep dives into the lore of Dark Souls. It's mind-blowingly good story, but it's all super hidden and just by context clues in the game. Nothing is ever like, oh, hello, I'm NPC X, I'm telling you exactly this backstory. It's like there's like artwork and there's little details that you have to follow along or observe. And yeah, that kind of setting, freaking awesome. I was actually going to try to do for my next campaign more of a, I mean, it's the same type, but I was going to rip a lot of things from Elden Ring, the newest of that game. A lot of their kind of flavors and aspects and like kind of pantheons and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then I guess the other subgenre of fantasy I really like is just the sword and sandals, I guess they call it, right? Sword and sorcery, like Conan and
Oh,
Sinbad.
okay.
Yeah, there's the like you were talking earlier about like, well, I'm just a dude in this world trying to get by, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I might have a sword or I might have a little bit of magic, but I'm gonna, I'm kind of wandering through trying to figure all this out. Like I love those kind of stories where, you know, you're just some guy and you just
Mm-hmm.
get swept up in this chaotic, fantastic story and you become a hero, but you don't start off as like, the chosen one or the,
Mm-hmm.
super powerful. You're just this dude and, you know, things go horribly wrong, but somehow you rise above it, right? Like that kind of, classic. And then combine that with like the swashbuckling action, swinging from chandeliers kind of stuff.
Yeah, that
That's
was
that's that's definitely the other type of fantasy I really enjoy.
yeah. That kind of feeling is also really good because I had a lot of my first couple games of trying to create a character. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people fall into this trap of like, yeah, I've been chosen by the patron of ravens. I'm their champion, but also I am half noble that is estranged from my family from the other continent that they've been searching for as well, and all these like things that you're as a player trying to inject as your story that you want, and then it's like, okay, cool, you're level 1. Um, you know, you're as weak as Villager 2. You might die in one hit. Good luck, instead of like you're kind of instead of starting out as like this hero backstory, eventually learning and becoming that hero. Sounds like a more realistic type of approach too.
Yeah, and my players always want to start off at like third level or fifth level because
Mhm.
it, in their opinion, like first and second level are boring as mechanically.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but that I feel like if you do that, if you start off at third or fifth level or fourth level, you're encouraging that I have a whole backstory already written and this is my
Yep.
character and you know where if you actually play out those lower levels you play through that cool story
Yeah.
you know and
It's
and
the or the prologue. Yeah, the
right.
before. Yeah, I agree. It's that exact feeling that you just said.
And so those lower levels are my favorite style of play. Like you know I would probably if I could make my games completely my way and didn't care about what my players wanted,
Mm,
I would probably just run a bunch of short adventures from level 1 to level 5 and then we'd just start new characters and level 1 to level 5 and just do that over and over again cuz those are my favorite levels of play.
yeah.
Uh, but
You're going through the growing pains, learning the ropes of your character. I feel like at level 5 is kind of like 3 is when you're starting to learn a lot of powers for a lot of classes and becoming into your own of what it is to be, the fighter subclass or whatever the case it is. And then at level 5, I feel like you are full on kind of like adventure hero status at level 5.
Yeah.
And then when it gets to like 10, you're like, okay, you're like a master now. And then when you get 15 to 20, it's like, okay, you can probably defeat a god. It gets really, really out there. So yeah, 1 to 5 is probably, yeah. I like 1 to 3 is awesome for character development, and 3 to 5 is easier to develop like encounters, I've found, because people don't just die in one hit. Yeah.
And I think as a DM, your brain has to shift gears once players get like 9th level and higher.
Yeah.
That you're no longer like thinking about real world physics and here's a trap and here's a here's a door to a room with another secret passage, that kind of like mapping the dungeon kind of stuff, that goes out the window once players are high enough level.
Yeah.
None of that
I cast etherealness and then just beeline it.
Right.
I don't care about your dungeon anymore.
Right. So at that point, you shift from like real world physics and dungeon design and encounter design to more like epic storytelling. It's like you go from running a game of Dungeons and Dragons to writing Justice League comic books.
Yeah.
You're writing epic stories for gargantuan superheroes who can literally break the world if they chose to.
Yeah, over their knee, just in half. Well, cool. I mean, that's kind of all that I could think about talking in for these points.
Yeah, this was fun. This was a fun way to go through things and kind of lay out like who we are through Dungeons and Dragons. So
yeah,
I think that's really cool.
And we'll be around every once in a while. I don't know if it'll be weekly, but it'll definitely be for the foreseeable future.
Right. And yeah, definitely. And the goal is weekly, and hopefully we'll get into all sorts of tabletop topics, from game design to encounter design to how to be a good player to how to build a cool character, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and this is something I want to push you towards is I want a tour of your minis and your tabletop designs of all the castles. I saw the foam things that you cut out. I want to know more about those, honestly. So, your craft stuff, you're a crafty person.
Yeah. I mean, basically all those boxes on those shelves behind me are just full of Dungeons and Dragons terrain.
Yeah.
Mountains
and
I
hills. Have nothing. I have a couch. So, well, cool. Yeah. So stick around, stay subscribed, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.